agencies are looking to do and how they want to do it. And that makes it easier and for them to communicate the requirements to you and to understand why some procurements might make somebody say, well, what in the world do you need one of those for? But if they're on site with the client, they understand it better and they can explain it to you better. There are about 6 divisions within OCP. The one that you will primarily be dealing with is the procurement division. That's with contract officers and contract specialists report into. Within that division, there is an Office of Diversity, Supplier Inclusion. And we're doing that we opened that office recently for a number of reasons. Obviously we want to have a very good, strong inclusion program, and who knows how the disparity study is going to turn out. So even if it turned out that the disparity study says we don't need a diversity program, we're moving in that direction anyway, so that there's a place at the table for everybody. Two of the divisions within the agency that I would point out are the surplus property division, which also looks after the procurement card. And I point them out because they're both opportunities for you as a supply base. When usable assets are at the end of their depreciable life, if you will, but are still good and working, OCP takes control of the asset in our surplus program. We make those assets available to the general public, and for the purposes of this presentation, to you, our supply base, because if, for example, you were in the moving industry or the delivery industry and you needed to buy a box truck, I don't know what a box truck costs, but let's assume it's $100,000 to buy a new one. It's entirely possible if you came to us surplus property division that we would have a box truck that may be a little bit old and a little bit loved, but lots of life left in it, and you could buy it for significantly less money. So that's an opportunity for you. Or if you're a new supplier and you need to outfit your office or your storefront, you can go out and buy lots of expensive equipment from an Office Max or some other big box store, or you could come to our surplus property department and maybe buy everything that you need for significantly less money. So it's something that we like to point out, and it's an opportunity for you there. The other opportunity is the procurement card, particularly if you're in the services business. What the procurement card is essentially, it's a MasterCard or a Visa that we issue to certain people in all of the agencies that we support. I mention it because if it were me, I would ensure that I have a merchant account for a lot of reasons. But in the case of selling to the district, I'd make sure I had a merchant's account so that I could accept the P card, because agencies can spend $2,000 a day for goods and I think $2,500 a day for services, as long as they don't exceed $20,000 in a month. So if I'm running a marketing boutique and an agency needs some kind of communication product created and delivered very quickly, if I take the procurement card, that just cut out a whole lot of time in going through the competitive bid process, because those numbers are lower than what's required for competitive bidding. You can be, I could provide the service that's required. Get paid with the P card. The advantage to that being you practically paid overnight versus going through the purchase order and invoicing process that could take 30 to who knows how many days. So we just like to point that out as another opportunity and something for you to consider. You certainly don't have to take the P card, but I'd encourage you to think about doing that. So let's move off to the next slide if we could.
Pete, we had a quick question come in from Cyril. He wanted to know, does your anticipated spend, the big billion-dollar number, multi-billion-dollar number, does that include all of the infrastructure money that will start coming in as of the once that vote is ever taken?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I believe the answer to be yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so We're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. It's really here to represent the breadth or the size of the portfolio of goods and services that OCP procures. So you have an idea of how much we're spending and how much we plan to spend. And these are the overall areas where we intend to do that spending. But this isn't all of it. If you think about 78 agencies and offices under the executive branch, there's probably nothing that that I can think of anyway, that we wouldn't be buying in support of that. So it could include fleet vehicles in addition to what you see here, and in just a number of other goods and services. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You can see that it's pretty diverse, and it plays to the spend, and it plays to the wide range of opportunity there is in selling to the district. So let's move on a little bit. Next slide. So when we're making a decision, a requisition comes into OCP from one of our covered agencies. This is how the procurement decision is made. Obviously, we look, do we already have something in stock in the warehouse to fulfill it? If not, do we have anything in surplus property that could fulfill the requirement if it's for goods? We look at existing requirements contracts. We look at IDIQ contracts to see if there's a supplier already doing business with us who happens to have what we're looking for in their portfolio of offerings. For contracts of $250,000 or less, those procurements generally are to go to qualified local small business enterprises or certified business enterprises. And that happens through something called the DC supply schedule, which we'll talk about later. We're not always fortunate enough to be able to do that with a local vendor, but that's the rule of thumb. The contracts that are greater than $250,000, there's a subcontracting component where the total dollar value of the contract or the award would have to be subcontracted back to a certified business enterprise here in the district if the contract was awarded to somebody in a different jurisdiction. So, and then there are other sources that we look at before the procurement is posted and made, and those include, can we get a better deal in terms of pricing, in terms of conditions and delivery if we buy off of a GSA schedule, or what's called a cooperative contract, which is where a number of states come together, pool their requirements for better pricing, for better terms and conditions. So we wanted to share this with you quickly. And again, you'll have the presentation so that you can stare at it on your own and then come up with other questions that you might have. But this is the Reader's Digest version, if you will, of sourcing preferences and how the decisions are made on how we're going to make a procurement. So with that said, let's hop on to the next slide. Okay, we already talked about the P card, which is referred to as micro purchasing, and this is the moment of truth. I did misspeak. Purchases of up to $2.5K for services and $5K for goods. So I had it a little bit flipped around when I mentioned it a few slides ago, but here's the real story. And at the end of the day, up to $20,000 a month. There are small purchase requests or RFQs. And that applies to procurements between $10,000 and $100,000. Note, and we're going to come back to this later on when we talk about the Green Book. Purchases of $10,000 or less are considered non-competitive. And purchases between 10K and 100K require 3 written quotes. It's important for you guys to understand that these are the way that we procure. First, you've discovered how we make the decision on what vehicle we're going to use. Now we're talking, well, I guess this is really talking about the vehicle that we're going to use. But if you understand the thresholds in terms of when something has to be competitively bid and when it doesn't, then that puts you in a position of power and maybe helps you focus your marketing efforts and your opportunity identification efforts that we're going to talk about in a number of slides from now. There are competitive bids so they're called invitations to bid. That's probably where you'll see the majority of solicitations that you'll be involved with. And that's for procurements that are greater than $100,000. And I recognize I'm going through this and a few of the other slides quickly, and I'm doing that in the interest of making sure there's time to really noodle through how to take care of how to leverage the transparency on the OCP site. So we can go to the next slide. There are emergency procurements. I'm not going to read you the slide. You can all figure out pretty quickly what an emergency procurement is. There are occasionally sole source procurements that are made. We all know what a sole source is. We don't see a lot of sole source procurements here in the district because we in OCP believe, here we are in 2021, you're going to tell me there's only one company in the whole wide world that can provide whatever the good or service is that is required. And then again, as we mentioned earlier, there's other sources that we can go to, like the federal schedules and the cooperative purchasing agreements. And I believe somewhere in the presentation, and if not, we'll provide it to you, there are links to how you might be able to participate as a local vendor in a cooperative contract that's servicing far more jurisdictions than just the district. So let's see if we can jump to the next slide.
And Pete, while we make that change, we had a question come in from Veronica, who wanted to ask, where does cleaning occur within DC government?
Cleaning?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a great question, and it occurs in the DGS, the Department of General Services, who happens to be independent of OCP. But again, you know, DGS looks to OCP and its chief procurement officer for guidance and direction, and they follow the same path that we do. They do have their own website, dgs.dc.gov, and it mirrors their transparency, looks similar to what we have in OCP. So that's a long answer to a short question, but the answer is DGS.
And Pete, Veronica had a follow-up question. What are written quotes?
What are written quotes?
Yeah, I think maybe explaining just the basics of a solicitation might help her, which I think you're going to do in a slide.
Okay. From a slide or two ago. That would be a case where the contract officer or the contract specialist reached out to 3 different suppliers, explained what the requirement was, and asked, send me an email with that you can provide whatever the goods or services are and what your quoted price is. So that's something to put into the file. Is that fair enough?
That is, thank you, Pete. And it really highlights the importance of, as you always say, staying in touch with the programmatic staff for all of those projects of under $100,000.
Good. Good. Okay, so some other possibilities. When you're working to sell to the district, the law in the district allows for you to submit special proposals for special pilot projects, and that could come from you pick your target agencies. You learn about them by reading their website and whatever communications they put out. You learn about it by looking at their forecast, and we're going to tell you in a little bit how to do that. But you identify a project that your target agencies are working on that you happen to have some experience in, but it's not on. But buying something in support of that project isn't on the forecast, nor is it in the green book. That's your opportunity, at least in my mind. And if it were me, that's your opportunity to say, I know a little bit about your business, and I understand that you're working on fill in the blank. We happen to have experience in that area. Here's a simple proof point. Let us know if we can help. And we could do it as a special pilot project for over a 2 or 3 month period. And why would you want to do that? It's potentially low hanging fruit that you didn't see previously because it's not on forecast. And it's an opportunity to become introduced to your target agency as something more than just another supplier that's out there. Slightly different than that, consider unsolicited proposals. Same thing as we just talked about with special pilot projects. You don't have to necessarily limit it to a special pilot project that's only over a couple of months period. You can simply send an unsolicited proposal. And I believe, yeah, we do. In the presentation, we give you the code to go look at that tells you what minimally needs to be in those kind of that kind of outreach. And then finally, cooperative contracts. We've given you the URL or that you can click on to get to NASPO's value point. NASPO is the National Association of Public Procurement Officials, and it's a division. Value point is somewhat of a division within NASPO that manages all these cooperative contracts. Why do I bring it up? I bring it up because if it were me and I were in the district, I want to take advantage of every opportunity that I can. So I would reach out to NASPO's value point to find out what contracts they have that the district is using and what other contracts, cooperative contracts, do they have that you could play in and be, for lack of a better word, a distribution channel. Hi, I'm here in the district. I can service the district and the greater Washington area. Make me part of your program. So it's something to think about. Those are some of the other possibilities of things that you can do rather than just waiting for a solicitation to hopefully be posted. So the next slide. Okay, so wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit about the Small and Certified Business Enterprise Act, because as I mentioned, or at least I hope I mentioned earlier, the district has a very strong affinity to local businesses. And that statement is not to discourage people or businesses in another jurisdiction from doing business with us or trying to. It's just that it's the district and the mayor and the administration and the one prior to it, and I anticipate the next one, are going to be very supportive of local business. Our program started out in, I think, the 70s or 80s as a diversity set-aside program where each agency was required to a goal of X% of its spend would go to diversity suppliers. Over time, that program migrated to something that's more industry and geography focused and is race and gender neutral. So those goals that were originally specifically for diversity suppliers expanded to local business inclusion. Agencies in the district have to commit to achieving a goal of 50% of their expendable budget will be with certified business enterprises or small business enterprises located in the district. And I can't say it enough. That doesn't rule out the opportunity for businesses that are in other jurisdictions. We bring it up because we want to make sure that our CBE and SBE community here in the district knows about this, but also to help at some level the playing field for those who are in different jurisdictions so that you have an idea of, okay, here's one of the challenges I need to deal with when I am selling to the district, because these businesses, these local DC-based SBEs and CBEs are afforded preference points up to 12%. It's important for CBEs and SBEs to remember that. It's important for businesses in other jurisdictions to know that that's one of the challenges that you'll face in the field when you're doing pricing. We have the DC supply schedule that we'll talk about a little bit in a minute that's exclusive to certified business enterprises. And again, a certified business enterprise is a business that's located in the district, headquartered in the district, and meets a few other specific criteria. And it covers the 16 areas that were on that earlier slide, trying to give you an idea of what the goods and services are that we buy. We also worked out a streamlined application process for certified business enterprises to become certified with MWA, the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority. They have an outstanding small business program, and they have an outstanding diversity program. So by being a certified business enterprise, another advantage to you for that is this streamlined process with MWA. I'm not sure what their spend is, but I have to believe 3 airports and a few other transportation facilities, it's pretty big. So that's another opportunity for you there. With all that said, and the commitment to certified business enterprises, if you're on the DC supply schedule, it's not a guarantee of business. It's an opportunity to do business with the district with some preferences to it. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. In fact, let's move two more slides, and I'm going to talk about this slide and the following two kind of in one breath, if you will, because although they're important, as I mentioned earlier, I want to get to the piece of how do I find the opportunity and how do I capture it. I mentioned early on that there's a subcontracting requirement in the district, and that again is for contracts greater than $250,000, 35% of the total contract value has to be subcontracted to a district certified business enterprise or a district small business enterprise. And that comes into play when it's an out of DC jurisdiction vendor that's been awarded the business. So somebody in Maryland or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or Skytook, Oklahoma, wherever they are, they have to contract 35% of the value back to a CBE. That's another way of demonstrating how committed the district is to local businesses. The prior two slides that we sort of glossed or skipped over talk about the laws saying that under $250,000, and we already talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor the point. Under $250,000 of procurements, 50% of those procurements have to go to certified business enterprises or a district-based SBE, small business enterprise. So let's kind of roll along to the next slide, please.
While I do that, we had a question from Ramesh,
okay,
who asked if the CBE goes to an out-of-town contractor to do 50 or 35% of the work, do you take away the CBE points from that part of the contract?
That's a great question. That's a great question. If a CBE is awarded as the prime in one of these contracts, CBEs are not required to subcontract. It's only when the award is made to a business outside of DC or a business that's not based in DC. That's the company that has to subcontract.
Okay, and Jerry has asked, as a CBE with 12 preference points, what's the best way to identify and partner with out-of-state vendors?
As a CBE with 12 preference points. In that case, I don't know. I'm not sure what would be the motivation to partner with an outside of our jurisdiction vendor. I could flip that dynamic and say, if you're a vendor in Maryland or a vendor in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that's the person that might want to partner or collaborate with a CBE because that's where they would enjoy the advantage of the preference points. So it's kind of the reverse of what I think the question was. Lauren, would you agree with that?
I do. I think that's definitely what Jerry was asking. And you know, how does she find the prime contractors? Our division, when primes come to us and say we need to find lots of subcontractors to help us with this project, so you will occasionally hear and see invitations from us to be part of those matchmaking sessions. And so it's very important to have your NIGP codes really thorough because we search by your CBE profile to see if you're the right kind of business to be working on this particular project. And then Pete, you've often given really great ideas, which is to go to the contracts awarded. and look to see who's gotten the contracts, and then just reach out to them and say, if you need help, I'm here.
Great. So some days I specialize in it. That was sort of a long answer to a short question, but hopefully it got to where we needed to get.
And Pete, we have one more question from Ramesh, who says, we are suffering on a number of contracts because DGS thinks it is proper to go out of CBE to get the work done.
They think it's proper to go out of the city?
I think they're saying to go to non-CBEs, to hire, sounds like, in short, Ramesh is saying one agency is hiring lots of non-CBEs to do their work.
I'd like to hear more about that offline, because DGS, even though they're independent of us, they have the same requirement, the same commitment to spend 50% of their expendable budget with DC-based small business enterprises, or CBEs. They even have a CBE liaison who can help with those types of problems and or challenges. Her name is Olivia Warren. So her email is olivia.warren@dc.gov. If you're having those problems, Olivia is your person. She can help work through those. She may not be able to resolve every instance that seems like an injustice, but she certainly can advocate for you, and that's what she is paid to do. Not to mention, you can copy Lauren and myself and anybody else in DSLBD to say, wait a minute, something's wrong with this procurement, and we'll take a look at it. Can't fix everything, but we'll certainly try.
Thank you, Pete. And I lost track. Are we on the right slide, or do I still need to move it forward?
I think we can move to the next one.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's start talking about, and this is a little bit of the, if it were the Pete speech, if it were Pete selling to the district, the strategies that I would use. It's certainly not to tell you how to do your business. It's to give you some thoughts of things that you can do, and maybe provide a springboard from those thoughts to other creative ideas that you might come up with on your own. I mentioned that OCP supports 78 agencies and offices. You can choose to market and try to win business with all 78 agencies. But if it were me, I'd figure out who are the 10 or 12 that are most likely to be interested in what I have to offer. Think about what the agency does, what are the services it provides to our constituencies, and where does it play with what your portfolio of offerings are. So maybe you take that 78 and you boil the ocean down to 10 or 12, you pick the number, but be realistic. Focus your efforts. You want to spend your time and energy where you're going to get the biggest return for the investment. Update your capability statements and profiles, and make sure that the right NIG or the correct NIGP codes are being listed. And Lauren touched on that a little while ago when she was helping me answer a question in this presentation. One of the many ways that you can find out if your NIGP codes are correct is to do exactly what Lauren said, and we're going to talk about a little more in a few slides. Look at the awarded contracts, look at the forecast to see the NIGP codes that you're using to represent your portfolio, the same NIGP codes that are in the existing contracts and that the district is planning to buy. Once it's said, that is really obvious, but until somebody says it, at least to me, it wasn't all that obvious. And oh, by the way, if you're presently selling to the federal government and you're trying to move into selling to local government or state government, the NIGP codes are going to be important because federal government uses NACIS codes. And don't ask me what NACIS stands for, because I can't think of it right now, but it's a convention of codes to identify commodities. And there is a conversion table that takes NACIS codes to NIGP codes. So just a little tip on that. And as you're establishing your targets, you might find out that there is a similar but different enough need between agencies it's okay, at least in my mind, it's okay to have multiple capability statements. Um, So you have a capability statement that addresses human services, and that can go to the Department on Disability Services or Health and Care. You could have a totally different capability statement that talks about the education that you can provide to the district or to other companies. Target your capability statement to your audience. Um, I don't know if my friends here in DSLB want to add anything to that, but at least for me, when I receive a capability statement that says I'm in construction and I do cleaning and I provide IT services, I kind of think, how in the world do you do that? So just food for thought. Identify who the program staff is in your target agencies, and you can relatively easily do that by going to the agency's website and looking at the organization chart. If your target agencies don't happen to list who the program staff are, I wouldn't be discouraged. If it were me, I would write to the chief operating officer of that agency or the chief of staff or the deputy director, because those are the people who are managing the money in the agency. Those are the people who are making the decision on when a particular project or procurement is probably going to be made. And if they see through your outreach that you have a better value, then they're going to give that information to the program staff. And that just got you some visibility into the people that are helping make the procurement decisions. So just a few ideas, as you start out. And even if, by the way, if you've been doing business with the district for 5 years, there's still, I think, some value in taking this kind of approach and maybe rethinking what the marketing strategy is. We can hop to the next slide. Okay. Know who you're competing against. Gee, thanks for the great advice. Everybody knows that. But here's the if it were Pete. I would take a look at the DC supply schedule that we mentioned. 16 different schedules that are multi-awarded to hundreds of vendors, all of whom are located in DC. Remember, I said certified business enterprises. And at the bottom of the page, it tells you the name and location and contact information for every vendor that's been awarded a DC supply schedule. You just found out exactly who your competition is. It's no longer, I think I'm in competition with these people. Now I know. And you can learn a little bit more about who your competition is. You can take a look at what's in the contracts that they have and use that knowledge to better position yourself. You can also use that knowledge for identifying who are the other CBEs or SBEs, small business enterprises, that you might want to consider teaming with. Why would you want to do that? You might want to do that because you see a super opportunity, a super solicitation that in your heart of hearts, it would be irresponsible for you to bid on. Jane's Widget Company, together, it would make all the sense in the world. Now you know who your competition is. And guess what? You flipped that dynamic. They're no longer your competition. They're your opportunity and you're their opportunity. So something to think about in terms of knowing who your competition is. Visit DSLVD's website and find out who are the certified business enterprises that maybe are not on the DC supply schedule, but the same strategy applies. You're finding out who's already been vetted by the district, and whether it's a DSLBD or OCP, and who are the companies that, when those big opportunities come along, I might want to consider doing a teaming or agreement or a joint venture with. So the long and the short of it is use this transparency to understand who your competition is, and again, flip the dynamic. And not just your competition, but your opportunity. So let's see if we can go to the next slide. on the DC supply schedule. Can we go back one, Laura? Excellent. On the DC supply schedule, I'm not sure if it's all 16 of them, but the majority of them include a rider. It's a government rider clause that allows some 50 local jurisdictions. So quasi government agencies, instrumentalities, counties in the metropolitan Washington area that can buy off of the DC supply schedule. That just gave you a ready-made target list of 50 government offices, including quasi-government agencies and instrumentalities that you can start marketing to. And part of the marketing pitch might be, you can buy through the DC supply schedule and take advantage of my wonderful pricing. You can take it from there on how you want to work that, but just realize that opportunity is there. And if you're not sure, if you're on the DC supply schedule and you're not sure if you have if that schedule has the rider clause, here's the address, the email address of the gentleman within Office of Contracting Procurement that can help you to find out and help you explore how you might take advantage of that. So there's a bigger audience out there, and we want you to understand that. A lot of people, it becomes amazing to them when they find out about it, because they've been on the supply schedule for 3 or 4 years and never knew it, that this rider clause was there. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, there is the OPC Transparency Portal. In terms of opportunity identification and capture, this portal is your new best friend if you're not already using it. If you are using it, hopefully we're going to share some thoughts with you on how you can maximize it. There are a variety of search capabilities within it, and it talks about what the forecast is for FY22. It's where all the solicitations can be found. It's where you can find awarded contracts. And, I'm not going to read you the slide, the 3 items that are on the bottom to the left, but we're going to hit every one of them over the next few slides. So let's move on. Okay. The forecast tab, all 78 agencies, and there's a few other non-covered agencies that report to OCP what they plan to buy for the year by quarter. For me, I would think about my targeted agencies, click on the forecast tab, and by a variety of different criteria, find out what agencies are buying what I'm selling. A lot of reasons you want to do that. Now you know who to market to and who not to market to. You have an idea of how much the district or your target agencies are planning on spending and when they plan on spending it. So you know when to time your marketing outreach. It helps you confirm your target agencies and again, size the opportunity. And as I mentioned earlier on, and I think Lauren touched on it too, identify that the NIGP codes that you're using for your goods and services are correct and match what's on the forecast. I think with a little bit of extra thought on your own part, you can find other ways to maximize that forecast as well. So with that, let's kind of move on a little bit. Every solicitation that OCP issues is available on the Solutions tab. It lists prior solicitations and the brand new ones. I'm going to be taking a look at that Solicitations tab to find out what is the district presently looking to procure. Is it something that you're interested in? But also use it to look back over time for patterns. Is this good or service something that the district buys year after year after year, or is this maybe a one-time procurement. So it helps you determine how much effort you want to put into it, and is it a solicitation that you want to respond to? Keep in mind, we mentioned earlier about the commitment to local business. If you're in a jurisdiction outside of the district, you're only interested in the solicitations that mention open market. Out of the other side of my mouth, if the solicitation says set aside or CBE only, that would be a great time if you're from outside a jurisdiction to identify who is a CBE or an SBE that I could join forces with and team on the opportunity. There's a few ideas of what you can do with the Solutions tab. And again, my bet is that any one of you can come up with a number of different ways to leverage this tab. So with that, let's move on to the next slide.
Pete, while we do that, can I do a quick commercial? I think you've got one coming in later on, but if anybody is looking for more in-person, hands-on, one-on-one coaching on any of these topics, one of the divisions in DSLBD, our Procurement and Technical Assistance Center, can provide quite a bit of counseling to businesses. You need to have been in business for at least 6 months. And if you've got 6 months under your belt, then shoot me an email and let's get you guys connected.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. We could spend time on this slide, but I think by virtue of getting ahead of myself, we've already covered what it says. Again, use this as an opportunity. Use this solicitations tab to see what the summary is. What is it that the district thinks they want to buy? Have they been buying it in the past? And it's an opportunity to reach out to the contracts officer to be invited to bid if you're interested in the solicitation. So with that, if there aren't any questions on it, let's just move right along to the next tab. Okay, contracts tab. It's a listing of all awarded contracts of $100,000 or more, past and present. Same story as before. You care about the past because you want to find out, is this a repeat? Is this something that happens every year with the district? You can use this contracts tab to get a feeling for how large is the business with that particular contract or whatever the good and service is. Is that enough money to justify your sales effort and your marketing effort? You can find out who has the business today, back to knowing exactly who your competition is. You can use it as an opportunity to reach out to that competitor and again, flip the dynamic to say, look, you're the incumbent, but I'm here in the district. And if you run into a capacity problem, I'm your new best friend because I can help you with that. Or you can have a conversation, depending on how arrogantly cute you are, you can have a conversation with your competitor to say, hey, look, we have the same portfolio. You and I both know that I'm not as good as you on these two areas, and you're not as good as me in these other two areas. So why don't we work together? You've got the contract, but when it's something that you know I happen to be a little bit better at than you, then why don't you subcontract the business to me? It's a way of changing the dynamic. It's a way of breaking into district business. The other thing on the contracts tab is you can find out when does the current purchase period or option year end. And don't make the assumption that the incumbent is necessarily going to win the next option year or procurement period. If you see that there's 4 to 5 months left in the current period, that's a good time to start marketing why your solution is a bit of value for the district. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to open a contract up for resolicitation, but it could be an opportunity to put the bug in somebody's ear, if you will, pardon the expression. You'll find a similar tab on the DGS site, and we give you the web link for that. But very simply, just go to dgs.dc.gov, and on the landing page, there's a little bar of, I guess, different divisions you could call it within the agency, and one of them is contracts and procurement. Everything we've been talking about thus far is presented there for DGS, just in a slightly different format, relatively easy to use and to search. So again, you're finding out who's got the business today, who's the competition, your opportunity to size the business a little bit better. Back to the comment about verifying your NIGP codes and knowing when to begin or not bother with your marketing efforts. I'll say it again. You're all very smart people. These are just a few ideas. This is some of what Pete would do. My bet is when you look at the transparency portal and you consider these thoughts, you're going to come up with a whole lot of even better ideas on your own. But at least it starts the conversation and the thought process. So let's move on to the next step. Or slide, I mean. And once again, I got ahead of myself when I've already talked about this slide, but it's a good reminder. One thing that I didn't mention that is on this slide is the reality is that the District Department of Transportation, although they use the same general procurement system, it doesn't always talk very effectively with what OCP at large uses. So I would encourage you, if you're in the transportation industry or anything even relative to it, to be taking a look at the DDOT website itself in case anything got missed and didn't manage to make it to the OCP site. And if you are involved in construction or architectural design or engineering, don't forget to take a look at the DDOT architectural and engineering schedule, and we give you the link to find that. So just some more opportunity relative to contracts and how you might leverage them. So let's move on. Purchase orders tab. It's another way to find out not just who's getting the business, but how much is being spent by the district and by what agency. You can search by a variety of areas, but for me, I'd be searching by NIGP code to find out what purchase orders have the district actually issued and to who, and how much were they for. It's a good way to find out it's a good way to sanitize, if you will, the forecast. You take a look and see, well, wait a minute, the forecast said that the district was going to buy $20,000 worth of these widgets over X period of time. And there hasn't been a purchase order generated yet. If I'm selling those kind of widgets, maybe that's not where I want to be focusing my efforts. And you can also use it to see if the goods or services in the Green Book are being purchased. And we'll talk about the Green Book in a couple of minutes. But there's some opportunity here for you. It's opportunity because knowledge is power. So take advantage of the purchase orders tab and what you can do with it. And again, it's a great way to cross-reference it against everything that you've done or with everything that you've done to make sure that there really is a market and where that market exactly is, meaning what agency and what its value is. Go to the next slide. There is a payments tab. And if you're in the construction industry, particularly, you're interested in this. And I believe DGS has the same thing. The payments tab talks about what did the district pay to prime contractors last month. Well, what do you care about that for? Well, for me, I'd care about it because if I was a subcontractor, I just found a way to find out pretty certain that my prime or my GC got paid. So where's my money? It gives you something to back up your request or demand, if you will, if a prime or a GC is dragging their feet in making payments. There's also, independent of this, on the OCP site, under, I think it's transparency, a separate link that talks in a little bit more detail about payments to primes and the payments that we make. So you could use that tab for what I just said, but also to see, okay, they issued all these purchase orders, when you were back at the purchase, did they make any payments on them? Again, it's a way to rationalize and size the business. So that's that tab. And the next slide, please. This is a link to agencies that are not supported by OCP. You care about that tab because first, up to this point, we've given you some information about 78 agencies, and that's a lot. But there's still a number of agencies that are not supported by us, although they follow our lead. This takes you to exactly what it is that they're planning on buying, because they're not going to be in the forecasts that's on the OCP site. And it gives you an idea to apply some of the same basic marketing strategies that we've talked about so far in terms of learning to know who the agencies are that you want to target and what are they doing and what can you do for them. And I think enough said on that. You get the idea. Oh, by the way, around that same slide and on the OCP landing page, under opportunities, there are links to solicitations that some of these organizations have posted that are not on the OCP site because they don't fall under our purview, including solicitations from DC Water, Events DC, WMATA. So there's a lot of information available on this portal and on the OCP site, and the encouragement is for you to take advantage of it and provide goods and services to the district in a quality and timely fashion, and at the same time achieve your own revenue goals. So the next tab. This tab talks about laws and regulations. It might sound kind of boring, but knowledge is power. You use this tab to get to what's called 27 DCMR. It's the procurement code in the district. And the knowledge that you gain from that won't help you pass the bar, but it'll certainly put you in a position of knowing exactly how the procurement process and the contracting process works in the district, which puts you in the further position of, if something doesn't feel right, you can confirm that, my bad feeling about this is correct, and I need to call the ombudsman, or I need to call somebody, or just get the reassurance that, yes, the way this particular procurement is being managed, this is exactly what the law says that it's supposed to be. It's not something that I'd encourage you to stay up late at night getting overly familiar with, but be familiar with it, because knowledge is power. And understanding the rules and how things are done makes you a better bidder, a better vendor, and it improves your ability to help drive an enjoyable selling experience to the district, which comes back to us, because if the selling experience is enjoyable for you, the buying experience is going to be enjoyable for us. And at the end of the day, everybody wins, and the district residents and taxpayers and visitors receive the goods and services that they need. So, and I've said, you don't have to become a lawyer, but get familiar with the information in this tab. Next slide. Okay. Waivers. So remember I said earlier that there is this huge and strong affinity to local business, but there are going to be times when you simply can't find the goods or services that you need from a district-based small business enterprise or certified business enterprise, or you just can't find a CBE or an SPD that you can subcontract to. So there's something called a waiver to having to comply. And the agency, through OCP, can submit a waiver to the Department of Small and Local Business Development Director, explaining why they believe they can't buy the goods or services from a local company. They have to talk about what the primary and secondary research they did was to confirm that. And then DSLBD will investigate and will post the request for public information for 10 days on their website. And I think we've given you the link at the bottom of where to find these waiver requests. But if it were me, especially if I was an SBE or CBE here in the district, I'd be looking at the waivers to see if there's an opportunity for me. Maybe back to the NIGP code thing. Maybe I listed the wrong NIGP code. Maybe a variety of things. And as a result of that, the district doesn't know that I sell those goods or those services. There's a process for you to be able to challenge the waiver. And you just may wind up finding that OCP will advise the agency, you know what, we need to retract that waiver request because we got a guy down the street that can do it. So take a look at that waivers page. And same as I mentioned on some of the others, if it were me, I'd be taking a look at prior waivers because they're all listed as well. And whether they were approved waivers or denied, I'd be looking for patterns. Is this the same kind of product or problem or service that the district continually seems to have to go outside the jurisdiction to find? And if all this time you could have been providing it, then your next marketing strategy is to get to the agencies who requested the waivers and let them know I sell that and I'm a CBE or I'm an SBE, and build your marketing strategy around that. So just one more way for you to uncover opportunity and take advantage of the transparency between the DSLBD website and the OCP website. So the next slide. Okay, this is, I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm not going to go through all of this. This is a picture of the DGS website, and the slide that you will receive, but the website itself has links to most of everything that we've already talked about for OCP, only it's DGS centric. And it's important because it's a way for you to find out, is there business for me there, where that business is, how big is the business? And don't forget, DGS doesn't just take care of the cleaning of the buildings. Most every bit of, I think it's called linear construction, so building schools and renovating schools, it's all managed through DGS. So their spend as a result of that is over $1 billion. That's on top of the money that we already talked about with OCP. So lots of opportunity there. And I would encourage you, especially as an SBE or a CBE, to take a look at the DGS site and start finding your opportunity. Next slide. Okay, this is again, this is a slide I'm not going to read to you. It just tries to give you an idea of what the goods and services are that DGS procures, and all of that can be found on that prior, the links on the prior slide. Now let's go to the next slide. Okay, the Green Book. This is in the CBE toolkit. Is that what it's called, Lauren? I might have the wrong term.
Business toolkit.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a listing that, or a book that the DSLBD puts together, perhaps largely based on the OCP forecast that we got from our agencies, but it takes a broader look. It goes beyond the agencies that we support. It gives you an idea of what the various agencies are planning to buy and when they're planning to buy it. Don't miss the opportunity to take advantage of this and cross-reference it with what you're able to find in the OCP's version of the forecast. But here's an example of where this could be invaluable to you, and it ties back to those procurement thresholds that I mentioned earlier on. But suppose you look in the Green Book and you discover that the agency that looks after voting for the district indicates that they're going to buy $10,000 or $15,000 worth of tables and chairs for polling locations in such and such a month. But you don't see it on the forecast. You found it here. And what's important to know, and why it's so important to tie all this transparency together, is that kind of a procurement. Remember we talked about the order of preference in procurements? The contract officers and contract specialists are going to go right to the DC supply schedule and see if somebody sells that $10,000 or $15,000 worth of office furniture, so that they can, they can streamline the procurement. So that's just one example of how, if you're not looking at the Green Book, you're not tying it together with the transparency and OCP, you could be walking away from who knows how much opportunity. Just would really encourage you to take advantage of that. This book really belongs to you. It's published by DSLBD, but let's take a minute to see if Lauren would like to add any commentary on how to leverage this.
Thank you, Pete. The most exciting thing, which Quintina has already put in the chat, is that we are working on the update right now, and it should be available within a few weeks. So we will be launching some new workshops about how to really dive into the Green Book in December. So by all means, please check back. This is we'll have breaking news as soon as it's launched. Very exciting. The cool thing about it is, like Pete said, it's a review of every single agency in DC government and their forecast for what they're going to spend. And you can search for it by agency. You can search by NIGP code. So if you know your NIGP code for selling computers, then you can use the online website to look for all of the agencies in DC government that purchase computers.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay. We talked about this a little bit earlier. MWAR and DSLBD collaboration. We talked about what it is, but just as a friendly reminder, if you're a certified business enterprise, there's a streamlined process to participate with and be a supplier to MWAR, particularly if you're a diversity vendor. So minority, woman-owned, LGBTQ, whatever category you are. It's a great opportunity for you there. And also with MWAR and this, I don't know exactly how it works, but we could find out for you. If you're in a boutique sort of business, whether it's marketing or you're selling trinkets and those kind of things, anytime you've been to the airport, you've probably noticed little carts with people selling stuff. They have a program specifically for that. So it's designed for smaller businesses, or I think we used to call it SOHO back in the day, small office, home office businesses, but to get some footprint in a major traffic area. I don't know, do you know anything more about that, Lauren, or how to leverage this collaboration?
I do. There's actually two ways. You can go through just their general kiosk program and rent a kiosk and get storefront, visibility and space for whatever you sell. It is goods, not just services. But you can also come through DSLBD. We have a special kiosk through the Made in DC program. So if whatever you're selling was fabricated in the district, then we invite you to be part of our Made in DC kiosk.
Terrific. Terrific. Okay. So that brings us to the I guess, a resting point in the presentation, because there's still a lot more information to share. But before we look at any of the fun additional information that we've included in the package, do we have any questions?
We don't. People have been kind of quiet with questions lately, so we don't have anything in the chat right now.
Okay, well, we'll go through some of these additional slides probably quickly, because you can take your own time to go through them. If you think of questions, after the call, which most of us will, just feel free to reach out to my office or to the SLBD with whatever your questions are. The offer that we always put on the table, particularly from the ombudsman's office, that's me, I'm the ombudsman, available for one-on-one meetings. Available for one-on-one, hey, let's talk marketing strategy. Yeah, I'm a procurement guy, but I'm out looking for the best opportunity to satisfy the needs of the districts, its citizens, its residents, its visitors, and at the same time, help you grow your business. And I like talking about that kind of stuff anyway. So the one-on-one counseling or meetings are always available. So that said, what happens when, or what should you do if you're not the successful bidder to a solicitation? Here in the district, if an award is made on anything other than price, you can request a debriefing, which will include the items that are talked about here. I'm not going to read you the slide. You can do that on your own. What I want to convey is that A, you have a right to know why you weren't successful. It's not an opportunity to come in and defend whatever your bid or proposal was, but rather it's an opportunity to come in and learn what you could have done better. What did somebody else do that made their proposal or bid better than yours? And where did you stand in the ranking of all those who bid on the same project? So it's a learning opportunity. It's hurtful a little bit, but I'd rather get hurt a little bit now so that I'm much smarter and I win opportunities later on. If the award is made solely on price, which happens a fair amount of time, lowest price wins, you won't be able to have a debrief, but what you can do is ask for a copy of the bid tabulation. What the bid tabulation does, what you will see is a listing of what the goods or services were that were being requested, your company's name, what you bid, company B, company C, company D. They won't tell you who the competitor was, but it's useful information because you can look at it and instantly figure out, I have so got to sharpen my pencil to be competitive, or whatever it is that my competitor is doing to be able to be profitable at that price. I got to figure out how they're doing it and maybe make some changes yourself, or just say, you know what? Now that I know what the competition is and what they're charging, and I can't afford to do it, but I'm not going to take the time to bid on these things again. You can play it either way. Either way, you can turn it into a winning situation from moving forward. So let's hop to the next slide.
And Pete, I'm sorry, we did have a question in the chat. So I want to say to anybody, if I missed your question, please sing out. Uchana has asked, what is the order of preference to seeking opportunities?
The order of preference for?
I think she would say, what should she do first to look for opportunities? Second, third, what would you say is the number one thing?
That's a great question. If it were me, it would be first attend a general vendor registration workshop that Lauren and I give, and there happens to be one next Thursday. It teaches you how to, or gives you an overview of how to register as a vendor with the district. If you're a district-based vendor, so qualified to be a CVE or are a CVE, apply to the DC supply schedules that are appropriate for you. While all that's going on, what we talked about, identifying who are your target agencies, but figuring out how to connect the dots for your target agencies to why your solution, your goods or services are a better value for them, and start your marketing campaign. And that marketing campaign could be very simple. Emails, I'm big on that because it gains mind share. It's not the same email over and over. It's short, to the point, It makes it clear why you're the vendor that the agency should address. So I think that's the order of priority. Does that give you enough information to help you figure out where to get started?
Thanks, Pete. I think it does. Uchana, you've got, oh, yep, Uchana said yes.
Okay, terrific, terrific.
Okay.
Any others?
So far, no.
Okay. Well, that means one of two things. Either I've managed to put everybody to sleep or we're doing a good job.
Oh, actually, Uchana did. I'm sorry, I'm missing all of these good questions here. Uchana did want to know, how do you know whether the bid was based on lowest price or not?
That's a good question. I think if it is on a DC supply schedule, it's going to be, if it was something that was solicited on the supply schedule, it's probably going to be lowest price. If not, then the solicitation summary should tell you if there's a technical criteria that has to be met. And if there's a technical criteria, then it's not going to be based on lowest price. Or you could simply send an email to the contract officer or contract specialist with a copy to the ombudsman asking him the question, what was the award based on? Or what will the award be based on? And that's public knowledge. You have a right to know that.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, I think this is your next slide.
Okay, so again, I'm big on not reading the slides because I've always hated death by PowerPoint. But what we're trying to do here is just have a little leave behind, or that you will actually get an email about what are some tips on responding to a solicitation. Again, I'm not big on reading the slides, but just be very clear about who your company is, about your experience, how you're going to fulfill the requirement. What's the methodology that you're going to use? Remember, when you're responding to a solicitation, not everybody who's going to be reading the solicitation is the subject matter expert that you are. So use plain language. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that the evaluators know everything that there is to know or that you know. Just be clear in your use of terms and consistent in the same way. And don't overwrite. If the solicitation is asking for, a set of deliverables, that because you are a subject matter expert, oh my God, they got this all wrong. Don't write a novel about how wrong it is. Respond to what was requested for with a see page 2 for some suggestions. The district generally knows what it wants to buy. Although not everybody's a subject matter expert, they are pretty intelligent. But if you see that something's a bit askew because somebody didn't understand things in the solicitation, it's okay to talk about it. Just don't overwrite. Don't provide a lot more information than is absolutely necessary. And then the next slide. Kind of more of the same. What is the criteria? What is the proposal criteria typically looking for in software? And I think to some degree this applies in services as well. In the software department, well, is what you're proposing interoperable with what the district already has today? Is it, can you forward migrate with it? How much experience do you have with the software or with selling this particular hardware or the services and solutions that you're proposing? Just be very clear about these types of things. Accuracy, logic, in all of these situations, and I've done this myself in businesses that I've had, write a proposal or a bid and give it to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about what you do, just maybe the name of your company. And if 3 days later, that person can come back and tell you what you're proposing, and you've got a pretty good proposal and a better shot at winning. It kind of plays to don't assume everybody is a subject matter expert. Sounds like a silly thing, but it's worked for me, and I've observed it work for others as well. Next slide.
Pete, we did have a clarification question from Luciana coming in. She says, wanted to go back to the order of preference about what to do with your time for looking for opportunities, i.e. should I start with the OCP website first or go straight to the DSS? Is there a preferred order? And I'd love to start, and then if you can make sure that we covered everything. Think of the supply schedule as something everybody has to do. The supply schedule doesn't apply to every business, so it's possible that your business is not eligible to be on the supply schedule. But if you are, you got to be there because it is the easiest way for agencies to find you. So that's number one. And then number two, I think we all want to go start applying to solicitations that pop up on the OCP website. But we recommend that actually, if this is your first project, first bid, you don't currently have any work with DC government, go for those smaller contracts that are not going to be competed on the OCP website. And so that's all the legwork of finding the agencies that buy what you sell and then getting your information to the agencies. Pete said email them things. You can also call the front desk and ask for the names of who would be looking to purchase what you're selling. You can drop off information about your business at the front offices. You can invite people to come for tours of your facility. You can give demonstrations about the services. But I would say after the supply schedule, the best way to go is that marketing directly to the program staff at the agencies that buy what you sell.
Excellent.
That sound about right, Pete?
Excellent. Right on. Spot on.
Cool. Thanks. Okay. I think this is your next slide.
Okay. So we share this with you because although it doesn't happen very often, unauthorized commitments. You have a contract with an agency, and it has a statement of work. You know what you're supposed to do, and some program person calls you and says, and this probably happens in construction more than anything else, but some program person and asks you to do something that's outside of the scope of work. And whether it's, hey, you know, we found out from DC Water that they're going to be doing some work. We need you to move the fences and the trucks and all these other things so that DC Water can do their job. Or we found out in some other program that's not construction related, we need this other thing that's a little bit to the left of what's in the statement of work. If it were me, the response would be, I would be delighted to do that for you. Get the contract officer to call me and send a change order. Because if you just be a nice guy and say, okay, yeah, I'll go move the fence and I'll move the equipment, or I'll, you know, do this extra piece of legwork in the statement of work, it's possible. Doesn't happen often, but it's possible that when you submit the invoice might get rejected because who told you to do that? Where's the purchase order? We didn't commit any money to that. And you'll get paid eventually, but myself, I don't like to get paid eventually. I like to get paid on time for having done what I was supposed to do. So I'm not suggesting that you be a bully with the program or an agency, but protect yourself. Don't accept unauthorized commitments. And this is a nice way to do that. And if at any point you're feeling pressured or stuck, don't hesitate to call the Ombudsman's office because we'll work with you in a supportive kind of way. So that's a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a caution. And it's something that you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about, but just be aware of it. So let's see. I think that's the last of the slides for this deck, but certainly we have, it looks like about 7 minutes left. So if there are other questions, feel free to ask them. And then if there's not, thank you for your time, and we'll talk with you again at another point. Lauren?
Okay, I don't see any other questions, but this is the last call for questions. If anybody wants to put something into the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you, you can ask it. Keith said, thank you for straight talk from PT. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Great presentation. Well explained. He has to jump off now, but thank you.
I do see a question just popped up.
Oh, cool.
The smaller contracts can be found on the OCP website. That is an outstanding question. The contracts that we post are $100,000 or more. So if it were me, the way I would tackle that is go back to the forecast and sort it by dollar value. Yeah, that's what I would do. That, and I would keep an eye on the DC supply schedule. Does that work?
Boy, that is such great advice, Pete. There's just a very large number of contracts that fall below that threshold. That means they have to be to be competed through OCP. And that really is a great way for you to start if this is your first foray working for DC government. It's a lot of legwork of making sure you can find the right people and making sure they have your information. But like Pete said, they only have to get 3 written offers from somebody, and then they can make a decision. So you want to make sure, and they reach out and invite people. They will say to 5 firms, can you give us a bid for doing this work, and then they'll pick from that. So you want to be on the list of firms that they think of when they're asking for those proposals. Got more thank yous for Pete coming in. Janet and Uchana both said excellent information and presentation. Thank you all. Valerie said very much thank you, and she's looking forward to the deck. So we will definitely be sure to get that out to you guys via. The deck will come out this afternoon, and then by next week we should have the recording up on the DSLBD YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it again if you want to. Oh,
okay, well,
we did have a question from Andrea. What's the best way to approach an indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity IDIQ contract?
the best way to approach it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure what's behind the question.
Andrea, if you want to put a little bit more information in the chat. And Pete, do you want to explain what an IDIQ is?
It's essentially, it's a contract where the government is entering into an agreement with you to buy goods or services, but we don't know how much of it we're going to buy. We could buy 1, or we could buy 1,000. We could buy a service, or we could buy 10 services, and we don't know when we're going to buy it. So it's indefinite quantity and indefinite delivery. I think to a certain extent, DC supply schedule contracts are probably IDIQ.
True.
So if it were me, I think my approach would be keeping profitability in mind. How long can I afford to keep the price that I'm quoting? Because maybe I'm going to quote $100 an hour for my marketing service today, but I find out that 8 months from now, I really ought to be charging $300 an hour for this. So I think I would focus more on identifying a competitive price up front that I can maintain competitiveness throughout the life of the contract.
That's a good point. If there's a price break driven by quantity, then make sure to use the higher price so that if it does kick into the higher quantity, you aren't losing money. Cool. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. Just a last call, if you are interested in any one-on-one counseling, reach out to Quintina or me, and we will make sure to match you up with the right person for that. And be sure and watch for the Green Book coming out soon. And as always, I would like to give a huge thank you to Pete for being the best ombudsman we could imagine. A great champion and somebody who knows what he's talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank you for sponsoring me and all the great work that we do together. And I want to thank our audience for taking an hour and a half when they could have been doing other things in their business, and they spent it with us. Thank you for that.
On one of the nicest days we'll ever have weather-wise. So you guys really deserve a special blue ribbon for today.
Absolutely. Okay, so with that said, we'll look forward to doing business with you all.
Thanks, Pete.